And as Omar mentioned, gene editing and CRISPR-based therapies have the potential to remedy previously untreatable diseases. And it's what we're going to be discussing today. Our panelists will tell us about their collaboration to discover, develop, manufacture, and commercialize a potential one-time cure for some devastating diseases. Dr. Carmenate, first, tell us about the breakthroughs that we're seeing at the Abu Dhabi Stem Cells Center. We know you've been doing incredible work there. What about these discoveries can you tell us, and what could they mean for the future of medicine and treatment?
Sure. Thank you very much for inviting us. I have to say in Abu Dhabi Stem Cell Center we have the social mission to be the bridge that is bringing union between basic and translational research to the clinical applications. So we have several programs in which we are leveraging our research to bring innovation to the healthcare sector. One of them is the hematopoietic stem cell transplant program. This is one of the most important ones we're conducting at this moment, and we're trying to provide with more information about what is going on in the fields of stem cell transplant and bone marrow transplant. Recently, we conducted the first stem cell transplant for multiple sclerosis and autoimmune disease in the region. And we are also trying to bring other cutting-edge technology for the implementation of cell therapies alternative like CAR T cells and TCR engineering. So those are one of the few of the most important advanced technologies we are implementing in Abu Dhabi Stem Cell Center for cancer treatment and autoimmune diseases.
So, for example, the stem cell treatment for MS, how do you measure the success of that treatment?
There are several kind of measures. There are clinical outcomes, there are radiological outcomes, but in general, we are very pleased with the outcome for our patients so far. It's been around 1 month that we did the first transplant. Still, we have to wait for a few years to see the real impact in those patients. And again, when we talk about curing patients, we need to actually define what we mean about curing. I don't believe from our point of view that curing is a biological aspect. It has epidemiological impact. So we mentioned before, some of the panelists mentioned before how important it is to have accessibility to healthcare solutions. And so in this case, it's very important that we bring to the UAE market, the Middle East, and actually to the whole world, with innovation that can be not only sustainable, but also accessible to our population. So in this moment, then we are going to be speaking really about curing diseases.
Dr. Sunbul, tell us a little about the research that's being done at Johns Hopkins Aramco Healthcare, and how could it potentially help us tackle future healthcare challenges, such as the one that we saw during the pandemic?
Assalamu alaikum. Just for people who don't know us, Johns Hopkins is actually a joint venture between Johns Hopkins Medicine, a renowned medical institute for research, and Saudi Aramco, the healthcare for oil and gas. The two organizations have been working very collaboratively together on this. Started off with the formation of the joint venture, which brought Johns Hopkins expertise. I think a lot of you saw those dashboards that went up for during COVID, as well as the researchers that are available in Saudi Aramco. And as we move forward to the next phase of technology and the way we deliver care, we're going to see more digital therapeutics and more digital diagnostics come in. And for that, we're going to need an abundant source of data. And we're going to be moving from descriptive analytics to say why something happened, from what happened to diagnostic analytics, and that's more to say why it happened, to AI that we saw with the predictive analytics, and the last thing is precision medicine and getting all this genomic information together to formulate the new future of healthcare and care delivery. And forming all that basis is what I think a lot of our organizations all around the world are working on, whether in terms of technology, people, and processes.
And Dr. Daggag, I mean, we all know that it took 13 years and $3 billion to sequence the first human genome. Tell us about how it came to be that this could now be done for a few hundred dirhams in a few days. And how do you see advances like this transforming the way healthcare is delivered and implementing future cures?
Thank you for the invitation, actually. It's lovely to be here. I think the word technology, we've been hearing about it since this morning, obviously, throughout every single panel discussion that was here. And for me as a geneticist, of course, it's very exciting that we are moving at this speed in terms of genomics and what our capabilities are today due to this technology. We also heard about the wearable devices. I'm wearing my Whoop and I don't go anywhere without it. My son has also a wearable device. So I think, the technology in the genomics field has enabled us to do the whole genome sequencing right now and to offer more personalized services in terms of the healthcare, because at the end of the day, really we all want to improve the quality and the quantity of life. We want to live longer, but be healthier also. And this is where precision medicine comes in, where it is offers this personalized approach. So we can move from just diagnosis and treatment more to prevention and prediction. And again, one of the main pillars of precision medicine is genomics. It's not the only one. Of course, there are other factors that play a role, but it is the main pillar. Also with the technological advancement in the genetic engineering field specifically, and with CRISPR kind of coming on, having the spotlight, let's say, in terms of gene editing, we now have the gene therapy and so many possibilities in terms of treating and curing different disorders because of gene therapy. So gene therapy seems to be right now the fastest moving field in the healthcare, and I think that the gene therapy market is predicted to grow from currently $5 billion to up to $20 billion in 2027.
This is globally.
Yes, this is globally. So it is, obviously, it's kind of an exponential growth, which is amazing to see what we can do now. One thing that's worth mentioning, perhaps, within this field of gene therapy is also what we can do with base editing. So not only are we able to kind of zoom in on the genome level, but basically on the base level of our genetic makeup and implement certain changes. And I think maybe most of you have heard about this little girl with the T-cell leukemia that was basically cured thanks to this technology that we have now. Another perfect example is hormone replacement therapy that can be implemented in the uterus now. So absolutely amazing advances in this field due to technology.
Absolutely incredible. And Dr. Carmenate, what are the scientific innovations that have helped to refine research and testing processes at your facility? And they deal with the study of bacteria, diseases, and viruses in particular, if we're looking at those.
So in terms of diagnosis and treatment for viruses, bacteria, and infectious diseases, I think we are pretty confident that we can make diagnosis pretty easier right now with the new technology, for example, in real-time PCR and next-generation sequencing, point of care, also diagnosis of infectious diseases. But at the end, the challenges remain the same. I mean, there are challenges in sensitivity, there are challenges in specificity that we are step by step overcoming them. But I think that some of the most important also achievement in terms of science and innovation comes not only from the methodology that we're using for the diagnosis and treatment of these diseases, but also understanding what these diseases are, the immunopathogenesis, the physiopathogenesis of them, so we can come in with better ideas of when to diagnose the disease, not only if we diagnose or not, but when to diagnose it, and how impactful will be that for the potential treatment in the future. So, for example, important innovations on that, I will say the hallmark of cancers for Hanahan and Weaver that help us a lot to understand the impact of the viral infections on the development of cancer and the tumorigenesis. I think this is something that is actually incredible, remarkable, but also the genomic. The understanding genomics is one of the also most important kind of breakthrough discoveries that we have for the last decades in science.
And Dr. Sunbul, what kind of role would you say that health tech and data analytics play in determining the diagnosis, the prognosis, and the treatment of rare diseases? You touched on that in your first answer, but if you could give us some tangible examples, that would be wonderful. Thank you.
When I started, by the way, a primary care physician. So when I started my career and saw how technology can affect patients and clinicians, I saw my calling. I don't know how many of you remember the Jetsons. The cartoon, The Jetsons. Okay, I see a few hands go up. Okay, so if you're that older generation, you all saw all those nice things that they did when they were able to do telemedicine visits and device integrations and wearables. Well, those are things, not things of the past, but these are the things that are happening now. So right now, you do see the future of healthcare. Today, we're talking about it, where hospitals at home, care is delivered where care happens, and care doesn't happen in hospitals; it happens at home. So all the digital technology that are powering that, whether it's the wearables, whether it's the device integration, and all that data that is pulling in, coming together, and to create what we're in the future going to be using a lot, and you're going to hear a lot, the digital twin. So the digital twin is basically taking all those data elements about one person, putting it all together, and then as clinicians, we will be applying all our diagnosis and all our treatment first on that digital twin, seeing what the outcome is before we actually administer that. So it's like a practice test to see what happens. So once we do that, we can probably get to better, more streamlined outcomes. And imagine when we put even genomic information with that, and we take the genome information, we add that in, how powerful that would be. And we talked a little bit about CRISPR right now. So doing gene editing, right? And there's two ways of doing that. So whether we're going to use gene editing to kind of help us with diagnostics, or whether we're going to go for therapeutics. And as we saw, gene editing doesn't need to be at the level of even editing the gene or changing it. It can be even just the way it's expressed. So diseases that we have right now that we see with hypercholesteremia, cancers, rare diseases, these in the future with gene editing will be a thing of the past once all these treatments become standards of practice. And in the future, we're not going to say what do we think the diagnosis is. We're going to always say, what does the algorithm say, and then we decide what we need to do for the patient.
So how near is the future? I mean, when could we see this implemented across clinics in the UAE, for example?
Well, across the world, this is now starting. So there are a lot of these therapeutic trials. You touched on one of them with the T cells. There are a lot of them that are already going on for different diseases. So it is becoming the standards of practice right now. And again, a lot of it is dependent on affordability, and because it does cost a lot to get these started. But once they become, we know more about the genome. So the way that this CRISPR works, especially if you're doing CRISPR to do diagnosis, is you take a bunch of cells, normal cells, for example, and you start to affect those and do some base editing on that, and then you see what the result is, and that's how you know what diseases diseases will happen. But and the same thing for the therapeutics. You take 6 cells, on those 6 cells you apply the gene editing, and then you know the treatment. So the more we sequence, the more we know. After a few years, I think we will have probably a fully sequenced genome to know which diseases are linked to what area. And with AI and machine learning, like we heard this morning, what would have taken us centuries a long time ago will be like years right now. So I think it's coming very soon to a center close to us.
Hopefully so. Dr. Daggag, how would you say that Abu Dhabi and the UAE is positioned in terms of leading the way in medicine, not just from a research perspective, but also from a commercial and from a clinical perspective?
So I think this is something that a lot of previous speakers have touched upon, and especially Dr. Farid Al-Hosani. She was actually discussing the agility of the leadership and the government. You know, I think we have that perfect example of what UAE is capable of doing through COVID pandemic. So the ability to massively upscale, you know, to react very quickly, first of all, and then massively upscale the COVID testing, to also do the surveillance, set up the surveillance labs and perform the surveillance across the country, to implement the clinical trial that was, I think it was first WHO registered phase 3 clinical trial for together with Sinopharm, where thousands and thousands of you know, people volunteered to be part of it, and then to have the effectiveness in terms of the vaccine implementation and dissemination and helping other countries that are perhaps less fortunate. So I think this is the perfect example that can show us what UAE can do. And when we are talking about gene therapy, the first thing, if you are introducing novel products, let's say therapeutic products, then you would need to be able to set up these clinical trials. And we've done it before. So, you know, we can definitely do it again. So although, you know, there is a lot of excitement around it and there is a lot of potential, I think it is also important to mention perhaps some of the challenges that gene therapy specifically might face currently from a research or commercialization perspective. And I believe one of them, just like with vaccines, is access. So right now, you know, countries that are doing perhaps a little bit better economically are the ones who would have access to gene therapy. However, the disease burden of these targeted diseases that we are currently trying to treat or cure with gene therapy, majority of that disease burden, or the highest percentage of that disease burden, actually sits in the low to middle income countries. So we need to address that. And again, UAE is perfectly positioned to step in and to assist, just like they did in COVID. Number two, we need to pay attention to the insurance challenges, and perhaps we would need to think about different reimbursement models that would work, because gene therapy in most cases is kind of a one-off treatment, so it's administered once and that's it. So that's not what our healthcare systems are used to, and that's not what our insurance is used to. So, you know, it will be important to kind of think about this. And number three, for the time being, gene therapy is mainly focusing on rare diseases, and rare diseases means small numbers of patients and therefore small numbers of participants in clinical trials. So there needs to be some sort of a internal, let's say, collaboration, you know, and infrastructure put so that we can best utilize what we have.
Also, I think gene therapy wouldn't be seen as a priority, just as COVID vaccines were indeed a priority to get them out to the poor countries in the world. Dr. Carmenate, what are your thoughts on gene editing and CRISPR-based therapeutics, and how they may figure into the future of healthcare and the quest for a potential one-time cure?
That's a beautiful question, and I'm super happy to have to answer part of it. I'm not expecting to cover it completely. I agree about gene therapy is a wonderful tool, alternative. I mean, for example, CRISPR has been in the market since 1980s, for example, and just a couple of years ago, in 2016, we had something concrete in the patient care. I think it's very important to understand how complex are the diseases we're talking about. And again, I'll second my colleagues, panelists here that are basically dedicated to rare diseases. I will mention also the word monogenic diseases because are easily targeted by gene therapy, especially by CRISPR. It's more complicated, a little bit more complicated, talk about polygenic diseases or polygenic risk score to be targeted by this kind of alternative. So when we talk about other diseases, not rare diseases like cancer, autoimmune conditions that are more prevalent and still they have no cure, then how we can create a cure, a definitive cure that is not going to help only one patient, but also my population, right? It's a complex system. We cannot think that we're going to address this problem only with one tool. I think we have to go to think about this as a complex phenomenon in which not only your genetic information participates, but also your epigenome, your immunome, many other factors that are also implicated in the pathogenesis of a determined disease. And with all this data that we collect, we come back with the previous speakers that talk about how we're going to analyze this data and come in with a real solution that can be long-term for our patients and that can also be accessible in our market. So, I mean, it's a very complex kind of situation. We have a lot of hope that with the tools that we have right now in our hands, including molecular biology, immunology, artificial intelligence, we can come in with good solutions in the near future. But it's challenging and passionate too.
Mm-hmm. And Dr. Sunbul, what would you say are the stages involved in examining, researching, and then developing a cure for a rare disease once it's been discovered and diagnosed?
So historically, medicines and care delivery has been focused on basically what is the standard of care and trial and error, right? So if we give a patient comes to me, I give him medication, it works, it doesn't work, I change it. But we all know that different people react differently to medications. Even the same person at a different time of his life, he might react differently to one medication or the other. So seeing how hard it is to develop medication, just as a fact, getting a regular medication to a therapeutic trial costs $2.6 billion, okay? And only 10% of those medications that get to therapeutic trials actually make it to market. So you can imagine how much money we're putting into this, okay? And this is just for a short-term cure that maybe trial and error, maybe it's gonna work, maybe it's not. So I think what we're talking about this is this permanent cure for a disease, is finding that base mutation or that base source of what went wrong and basically being able to correct it. That is the future. And whether we're going to use this for diagnosis, and by the way, they did have those emergency use also tests that were CRISPR tests that they had done for emergency rooms during COVID. So we've already actually released stuff out to the market. We just had a really nice meal out there. Do we know if any of those tomatoes were genetically modified? Because those were really nice cherry tomatoes. So, so right now in agriculture, they have fish, they have foods that are already modified. And so I think it's this is the way to go. AI, machine learning, and I think very important, like you said, nobody, one hand cannot clap on its own. It's collaboration. It's everybody coming together to work on this, whether through federated learning or being able to collaborate, because to come up with these algorithms and to figure these mutations out, you need large data sets. And there's no one organization. Abu Dhabi can't do it on its own. So the whole of Saudi Arabia can't do it on its own. It's going to take lots of collaboration amongst the scientific community.
Absolutely, and I think everybody in this room is ready to collaborate and explore new ventures. Dr. Daggag, tell us about the Emirati Genome Program, if you would, and how population studies like this can really contribute to the discovery, development, manufacturing, commercialization of novel genomic therapies.
So I think, obviously, Dr. Fatma Al-Kaabi is much more suited to talk on the topic of the Emirati Genome Program, but I can just briefly mention really the end point is the data. So obviously another absolutely amazing achievement, you know, to have an initiative such as the Emirati Genome Program and to be able to generate huge amounts of data that can be utilized in so many different streams, really, when it comes to healthcare. I think it's very important to understand that what why the Emirati Genome Program is so significant is when we are talking about the Arab populations being underrepresented when it comes to the genomic data that exists out there. And this kind of initiative and other initiatives across coming from Arab countries are going to play a major role in the basically Arab ethnicity no longer being underrepresented. Now, why is that important for development of drugs or, gene therapy products? Well, it's because of the genetic variation that we can actually see in individual genomes. So once we have an Emirati reference genome, we will be able to much better design specific targets or target specific regions of that genome that might be more involved in disease development in the Arab population in comparison to other populations. And obviously, we all know that the prevalence of the autosomal recessive diseases in Arab population is higher than in the general population, and this kind of approach with population-based sequencing program can help us design and develop better drugs that are more personalized. So we, again, kind of go the full circle and come back to precision medicine or personalized medicine, where we really just need to shift the way we think about healthcare. And I think we just need to kind of move away from that model of sick care, which we are using currently, and really move more into healthcare, where we are kind of going in much earlier, rather than just targeting the treatment and diagnosis. We can really kind of be more proactive about it.
And when do you anticipate we will have the Emirati reference genome?
I believe that, and please, Dr. Fatma, correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe that the academic institutions in the UAE are working collaboratively on this project, on this initiative, and I believe that it's going to be ready within the next few months.
Doctor says middle of next year. Okay, we will check back with you then. We have run out of time, but I cannot end the session without opening the floor to the audience for at least one question. Would anyone like to ask a question? Yes, sir. We have a gentleman in the front. Over here, Omar, just in the front table. Oh, okay.
Yeah, thank you so much for enlightening speech. I have two short questions. First one to Dr. Yendry. You mentioned the CAR-T project. What about, I know that CAR-T is a game-changing technology that saved already many lives of cancer patients. What's your opinion about the manufacturing process? Because it takes around 2 or 3 weeks. When the allogenic CAR-Ts will be available, off the shelf, ready-to-use CAR-Ts for cancer patients.
So if I get the question is that when I think allogenic CAR-T is going to be available, right? So I mean, there are currently several research ongoing in CAR-T for allogenic treatment. I believe it's a wonderful alternative in the future because not every time we can do a good collection from autologous source to treat patients with cancer or autoimmune conditions. I foresee that less than 5 years we could have something strong in the market that could be actually a game changer for cancer mainly. Autoimmune condition will be another situation, it's something different, right? But mainly for cancer and even probably solid tumors. I will dare to say not only hematological malignancies but also solid tumors could have a good alternative with solutions in the next 5 years.
Thank you so much. And a short question to Dr. Hinda. The gene and cell therapy sector, you mentioned that it's fast developing a key sector in biotechnology, but these therapies cost millions of dollars. For example, Zolgensma drug, it's around $2 million per patient. What do you think about this pricing and when it will be more affordable, especially for emerging markets?
Well, I think that's where we go back to accessibility. You know, I don't believe that this is something that it is the sole responsibility of the healthcare providers. This is something that the regulators, together with the insurance companies, together with the healthcare providers, have to sit down and discuss. I feel probably for the UAE, you know, all the governance and compliance and ethics and the regulations need to be, all these processes need to be set up so that we can introduce gene therapy. And again, UAE and countries like UAE who are more privileged, let's say, and are capable of helping others are going to have to play a big role in helping the less fortunate countries.
Thank you.
And I would like to thank our panelists for your fantastic contributions today. We appreciate all of your insights. Thank you to our audience. Thanks, everyone.